So we have some new reporting in that I want everyone to sit and take a listen to. And it is a stark warning that came in to the White House in January. It's being reported by Maggie Haberman of the New York Times. And it says, trade advisor warned White House in January of risks of a pandemic. And this is a memo from Peter Navarro, said failure to contain a coronavirus outbreak could lead to hundreds of thousands of deaths and trillions of dollars in economic losses. It is the most direct warning known to have circulated at the key moment among the top administration officials. Again, this is being reported by the New York Times' Maggie Haberman. I'm just going to read some of it to you because I find this reporting it's striking. It is disturbing, and it provides it gives you a look into the administration's thinking and what they were doing back in January when this coronavirus outbreak started to come to light. And it starts by saying a top White House advisor starkly warned the Trump administration officials in late January that the coronavirus crisis could cost the United States trillions of dollars and put millions of Americans at risk of illness or death. Again, this is the New York Times. And it says the warning was written in a memo by Peter Navarro, President Trump's trade advisor, in the highest level alert known to have circulated inside the West Wing as the administration was taking its first substantive steps to confront a crisis that had already consumed China's leaders and would go on to upend life in Europe and the United States. The report by Maggie Haberman goes on to say, and it starts with a quote here, the lack of immune protection or an existing cure or vaccine would leave Americans defenseless in the case of a full-blown coronavirus outbreak on U.S. soil. Mr. Navarro's memo said, this lack of protection elevates the risk of the coronavirus evolving into a full-blown pandemic, imperiling the lives of millions of Americans, end quote. As I read from Maggie Haberman's report in the New York Times, which says, trade advisor warned White House in January of risks of a pandemic. And then it goes on to say that the memo was dated January 29. It came during a period when Mr. Trump was playing down the risks of the United States, to the United States. And he would later go on to say that no one could have predicted such a devastating outcome. He is still saying that right now. But again, January 29th is when the memo was dated, during the time that the president was playing down the risks of the United States, even though this warning was written in a memo to Peter Navarro in the highest level alert known to have circulated inside the West Wing. Maggie Haberman joins us now with to talk to us about this report that just was released and that she filed earlier this evening. Maggie, this is in-depth reporting, and it is very disturbing, this memo by Peter Navarro.
And Don, thanks for having me. Yeah, this memo was dated, as you know, January 29th, the same date that the task force, the first version of the coronavirus task force, was appointed and met after President Trump convened it. And it issued a pretty stark warning. You know, it was around the notion of whether there should be a travel ban from China. And a lot of people, I think, got stuck seeing it through that lens because Peter Navarro, the president's trade advisor, is a notorious China hawk. But what he details is the economic toll on the country and the loss of life that could take place in the country in various scenarios of either containment, aggressive containment, or no containment. And either scenario was bad for the U.S. And what it points to is that at least this memo was circulated pretty widely within the West Wing. We don't know whether the president saw it. His aides and Peter Navarro declined to get back to us, but it does indicate that at the upper levels of government, at least some officials were aware in late January that something bad could be coming to the U.S. at a time when the president was downplaying it.
Well, the president is saying no one could have predicted this. He keeps saying that, but his own trade advisor predicted it.
His own trade advisor predicted it. His own trade advisor warned that there could be serious ramifications for the U.S. If more was not done. He compared the novel coronavirus to previous pandemic viruses around the globe. He talked about why it was a potential threat. And again, he went over, in terms of the loss of life estimates, and he went over the potential cost. And he put the cost in the trillions of dollars. As we know, we are now in the trillions of dollars of economic burden caused by the attempts to deal with the coronavirus. And again, it just is going to raise fresh questions about who saw the memo, what they made of it, whether the president was aware of it. Again, I do think that it's important to note that a number of people who were familiar with what was taking place at the time argue that in hindsight it looks clearer than what the arguments were at the time, based upon available evidence from doctors and based on the fact that Peter Navarro and another official, Matt Pottinger from the National Security Council, were both often talking about China's bad behavior in their eyes and wanting to deal with that. And I think that was the lens through which people took this. As it turns out, Peter Navarro was pretty prescient.
Maggie, the president saying this could not have been predicted. This memo, says otherwise. Not sure if the president saw the memo, but it was circulated in January around the administration.
That's right, Don. Look, it began by Peter Navarro writing it, as we understand it, sending it to the National Security Council, and from there it was broadcast out more broadly around the administration, and a number of people, as we understand it, did see it. How closely they read it, whether the president saw it, these are all questions that we don't know the answers to.
Would it be hard, though, to believe that the president, from his own trade advisor, that the president wouldn't see a memo like this? I don't know. I'm not at the White House. I don't report there, but what do you think? There's
not a typical process at this White House. There hasn't been for, frankly, almost the entirety of the administration. So it is certainly believable that he didn't see it. The question is how many other people saw it and how widely it was talked about. And Navarro is viewed with skepticism by a number of his colleagues because of some of his trade positions, because he is so singularly focused on China and has been for a long time. That was how people assumed he was seeing this, as another threat from China, as opposed to him sort of looking at evaluating the various possibilities here for what could happen in the U.S. if this spread. And he was not the only person who was warning of this. Matt Pottinger, chief deputy at the National Security Council, was also concerned. They were in the minority.
Maggie, also, there's in your reporting, something that has been that really gnaws at me is when the president talks about this travel ban, which really wasn't a travel ban. It was a travel restriction, saying he acted early on. It talks about Peter Navarro wanted something that was much more comprehensive. And you say the travel limits subsequently imposed by Mr. Trump did not entirely ban travel from China, and many travelers from the country continue to stream into the United States. Go ahead, Maggie.
No, that's right. Look, a Times report in the last couple of days actually revealed the breadth of the flights from China that have continued to come in, despite his instituting this restriction on travel. To be clear, look, he was heavily criticized at the time when he did it, something he talks about quite frequently. There are people who say that they think that this was a draconian measure that may have been effective, but it was not complete, and it was not even close to what Peter Navarro was suggesting as the most extreme possibility in this memo. He talked about the potential of a full ban for 12 months in order to do the most extensive form of containment that could be done. That's obviously not what happened.
Well, Maggie Haberman, I have to get off the air now, but thank you so much. Maggie Haberman reporting her report in the New York Times. Trade advisor warned White House in January of risks of a pandemic. Look to the New York Times for that reporting, and also tomorrow morning on New Day.